In 1993, I visited the Philippines with Edita and Robert. But she needed to return home a little earlier than me. She was keen to introduce me to her brother, as she might have thought that when intellectual people met, there would always be an immediate bond as friends. However, I felt that she wanted him to assess me about my suitability for a continued friendship with her, or even marriage, but I was not certain. She also wanted me to meet her mother in Pangasinan, and I was very curious to meet her. Some time ago, Edita had shown me the only photograph of her mother amidst a group of pigs. She was a pig farmer, and was apparently very concerned about her daughter, but for some reason Edita spoke little of her mother and avoided talking anything important about her, probably feeling embarrassed. She was going to fly over with Robert a little earlier than me, and I was to organize a few things, such as temporary accommodation for the cats during our absence. Shortly after, I took an international flight to Manila to be met at the airport. However, when I go to places and meet people I have not met before, I like to give them a little thank you gift, and was advised the best gift, which would really be appreciated in the Philippines, was some meat, preferably Australian beef, lamb, and a few other things. They needed to be thoroughly frozen, well wrapped in plastic and foil. The butchers I usually shopped at, they would do it for a small fee, and the food would remain frozen until its final destination. I was looking forward to seeing the surprise and excitement in the eyes of people when they shared the food. According to information, meat was very expensive in the Philippines, and so hopefully my gift offering would be appreciated. I took some other food items as well, such as breakfast cereals and chocolate. Bringing in certain food into Australia is not permissible, but like a few other countries, the Philippines welcomed the idea. As mentioned, I had previously visited the country a while ago for a different reason. However, this time I was going to stay in the Philippines I was partially familiar with as a curious tourist. I packed the necessities, food items, and film equipment, although I always preferred to travel as light as possible. It proved a great and practical idea to send some articles to the airport before my flight. I was told the reason why Edita and Robert traveled ahead of me was because of his schooling after the holidays. This gave me time to check on how Reg was doing with his health, and discovered him to be his usual self, his jovial nature apparent, but needed to have a few more urgent medical tests. He prepared his usual strong espresso and spoke about his forthcoming appointments, treating it all like a joke. Then I contacted Malak and Edgar about my flight schedule, Edgar telling me he had spoken to his sausage, which was a term he used when conversing with his wife for a light-hearted jest. If I wanted to, I could stay at their home, ready for the next morning's early flight. After all, he said, if you traveled from Chelsea Heights, it would cost you more. What a change of heart it was. Although unwilling at first, due to expected advice from Malak, I remained with Edgar's suggestion, as it was going to make things a lot easier. I had only taken what I was going to carry in the plane. I appreciated Edgar's concern, but at the same time was extremely fearful about Malak's need to advise me, yet again to consider marrying Margaret. That was enough to spoil the excitement, but I chose to keep calm and reserved, telling her, repeating several times over, that I was going to think about it. I just wanted to have some peace from those unwanted and unwarranted lectures I did not need to listen to. As per Edgar's advice, I walked to a phone booth near the station so that he could pick me up with my heavy luggage. While dialing their number, a very strange and frightening thing happened. There was suddenly a very loud bang, as if the phone booth had exploded. I was shaken as I stood inside the tiny area, wondering what had just happened, and noticed that the entire glass walls of the cabinet had pulverized into finest sand, and the metal frames were buckled. I hoped people did not think I was attempting to explode myself as some suicide bombers do in the name of their belief. Then I pondered that perhaps certain unfamiliar energies around me had caused it. Did I perchance possess some high energy levels, which the elements the phone booth was made of did not have a chance to withstand? A middle-aged couple, having noticed what happened, approached me with some apprehension to see if I needed any help, but I was perfectly fine and well protected. There were no cuts and bruises on my physique. They said that they had never seen anything like this before, and were worried that somebody might have wanted to harm me. I tried the now partly damaged phone to dial Edgar's number, although the earpiece was missing. While people called the police, Edgar heard what I said over the mouthpiece, and arrived to pick me up. I told him what had happened, but during the commotion he did not take any note of it, just helping me put my hand luggage in the car, while asking me where the rest of the luggage was. On arrival at their place, I explained that the rest was already at the airport, yet when speaking of the telephone booth incident, both he and his wife did not take any notice of what I said. Remembering my daughter's attitude, I thought I had probably been shot at by somebody who hated me. I was once again concerned with the thought of how vindictive some Jehovah's Witnesses could be, and how my lovely daughters attempted to harm me even when they were very young. Since I could not get through to Malek and Edgar regarding what had just happened, I remained silent. They might have thought I was talking gibberish due to my excitement about going to the Philippines. It was when Malek told me that perhaps I was so excited about the prospect of tomorrow morning's flight, I had probably experienced an adrenaline rush and was imagining things. So I should have an early night in their guest bedroom with a huge library. I settled with that option in that beautiful room with lots of excellent books to choose from. According to Edgar, a number of important people had slept in this room, and I would most certainly feel their vibrations. Malek told me I should feel privileged about this while we ate a very light dinner of chicken soup and a roll. I was grateful for their generosity and kindness. I pondered upon this wisdom. We are the reflection of what we have been. We are also what we are going to be. People certainly do not change with their stubborn natures as they mature, and so I decided never again to dwell on telling them my side of the story, for everything I attempted to explain was like talking to thin air. However, what happened to me when trying to use that public telephone occupied my mind all night through, and a number of other issues kept intruding in my reverie. I did not sleep a wink. I had also recently developed yet another hernia due to unprecedented accidents, which had gradually become uncomfortable. Alas, almost all men are born with a certain weakness, and hernias can happen at any time in one's life. I needed to be very careful when carrying heavy loads. Furthermore, I thought that going to places like the Philippines could perhaps be beneficial to calm my mind and frayed nerves, at least for a short while. After arrival at Spencer Street station, I felt the need to have a light snack before boarding the airport bus. because I did not have my usual breakfast that morning. I had mixed feelings whether I was doing the right thing by this journey. Then again, construing yet another imaginary scene in my mind, I thought perhaps there was a desperate need on my part to have a break from everyday concerns. Pondering not only about my own personal traumas, but everybody else's as well, I visualized that this mini-adventure could open up some brand new vistas for me. Also, discovering about other cultures could be very refreshing. So thinking, I packed my thoughts and fantasies in an imagined bundle and arrived at Tullamarine Airport. I was in a very chatty mood. I had to smile and talk with people in the waiting area who were full of dreams, expectations, and a few concerns. I drew caricatures on small pieces of paper and gave them to people. Firstly, to those who appeared very worried, and children found them entertaining. The whole idea was to make their flight memorable. I was determined to document my experiences, e.g., my flight to Sydney and Manila, filming much of the experience and my impressions from start to conclusion. I was so excited to observe the magnificent clouds from above and the beauteous land below. I observed the sunrise while listening to the moaning of some people during the many hours of flight. I wondered why people popularly chose to complain about things instead of enjoying the sights. Maybe it was just another subject to ponder on in order to eliminate their fears of flying, or to pass the time with mostly irrelevant thoughts. Could it be an attempt to control their frustrations in the face of long delays? Strangely, safety and health issues appeared to remain unimportant as the flight progressed, and people continued consuming lots of good food and watching utterly boring videos. The excitement of flying amongst the clouds and being delighted with the landscape and mighty ocean below, as observed by the enthused passengers through the tiny windows, was a phenomenon to behold, and the children usually enjoyed the whole experiment better, if not inflicted with adults' fears. However, because of their fears, many tend to enjoy flying like the birds in the sky only in their fantasies. Some people I have known have often declared the delights of flying free in their dreams. Thankfully, the young seem to enjoy actual flight more. But on a beautiful flight like this, some folks seem to freeze in fear of heights. Many therefore prefer to close their shutters, probably wanting to watch a video or two, even ones they might have seen a dozen times before, just to pass the time. There were others who preferred to calm their nerves by listening, reading, or drinking. I belong to a group of people who like to enjoy life, no matter under what circumstance and in what form. I thoroughly enjoy flying. When I was a child, I was convinced that I could participate in flying, even traveling into space, to the planets and the moon. After their multifaceted dreams and fantasies, many learned men and women were prophesying scientifically that mankind was to travel into space within this generation. Many decades later, nothing was done about it, other than a few attempts to listen to other intelligences and landing men on the moon, just to abandon the experience in order to have enough riches to conduct their wars. Like many other children growing up within this generation, I was gravely disappointed. Humanity had certainly progressed in many ways throughout the decades, but their religious intolerances, enmity, separations, and hatred towards each other had also equally advanced. Like in the olden days, They had many religious wars and regrettable racial discriminations. Some religious leaders kept making suggestions that the heavens belonged to a gracious God, and therefore we should leave heaven or space-related matters to God and never sin by going into space or to the moon. Yet they were the same leaders who blessed man's wars, portraying them as God's will. What I have discovered is that as long as any religious ideal is being followed blindly, there can never be any peace or advancement. Man's religions have slowed their progress to a deadly stop. I still ask, will there be any unity and peace in man's world? Will they ever learn how their war efforts have negatively influenced the lives of millions of people? What we have discovered shows us the effects of man's religious beliefs. When incorporated in worldwide politics, they have ruined their lives, their progression, and their world. Those who dared to speak of this were laughed at, ridiculed, and even persecuted in some parts of the world. The religions of men assist them to live more in fear now than ever before, with an uncertain future. Fortunately, some members of the human race still have the wisdom and progressive sciences which can unite the people of Earth without discrimination. It is never too late. When people can begin accepting one another like our little ones do, unless they are completely preempted through religious darkness and indoctrination, perhaps then humankind may start seeing the light as it was meant to be. Drifting in these deep thoughts and enjoying the flight, as always, while wishing it never ended, I glanced out of the window. When finally over the Philippines, like many others before me, I could only admire the scenery, the beauty and glory stretching far and wide from that vantage point. One area caught my attention briefly. What I observed was like a beautiful earth goddess lying upon the oceans for her beauty sleep under the warm rays of the sun. She was certainly in the nude. One could see a few rounded hills rising up towards the sky like female breasts. Some things are better seen from the air. The greens of the islands were also so different from this distance in the misty air, and one could discern the difference when comparing it with other parts of the world from a plane. Alas, this journey had to come to an end, and we descended gradually after circling the city of Manila several times. This worried me somewhat, for we have not been enlightened by the crew why there was a need to circle the city so often. During this time, I made use of the opportunity and filmed the capital from above. I kept running my camera during the landing, which was a sudden and sharp impact, followed by the plane tilting on its side so that the tip of the wing was digging into the paddock where we stopped. I could see a few people I assumed to be farmers running away from where we landed. We were told to exit in an orderly fashion and that there was no danger. We were led to shuttle buses, while some were taken into ambulances or to the waiting area in the airport. There was not a single word about what had just happened, making me wonder if this kind of landing was normal. It was unusual and quite concerning. We were led to the luggage collection point and the customs area, where airport officials verified our information. The well-packed frozen meat from Australia was considered a great idea, and they were so happy for someone assisting people who perhaps could not afford to buy meat in Manila, for it was extremely expensive. The cereals I brought with me were also appreciated as a great help for needy Philippine children. I certainly did not expect a reception of this kind, but was happy. Soon after, I met with Robert, Edita, and her brother Tony, who helped me pack the luggage and other items I had brought into his four-wheel drive. As we passed through the streets of this well-established large city, one could see how grey and black the entire metropolis looked. I noticed that many old American Army vehicles and jeeps had been modified for local usage and were very colorfully decorated with flashing colored lights all around them. Tony explained that they were used like taxi services all over the country, but Westerners would find it hard to squeeze into them, for they were taller than many locals, as I was soon to discover this for myself. There were also many bicycles with a small covered compartment at the back to carry people short distances, and several were waiting in groups to assist locals or tourists. Like the decorated army vehicles, they had lots of artistic graffiti, and Tony told me the story behind them, and they were known as jeepneys. There were lots of people running frantically to and fro in almost every street, while the traffic was moving very fast in some parts and extremely slow in others. Soldiers were everywhere with their machine guns, even ready to stop any kind of aggression. I was told that seeing soldiers everywhere was normal. They were seen as protectors of people and security officers at shopping centers, as could also be seen around walled and closed communities. There were so many vehicles, cars, trucks, and lots of buses. Some of the buses had open tops filled with people, holding a tissue over their faces. This was also evident with almost everybody walking on the streets. It was explained that people had to protect themselves against breathing problems, as the air was extremely polluted with diesel fumes. When people removed their handkerchiefs, one could see how the unprotected parts of their faces were blackened by the fumes. In fact, almost always the air smelt of being laden with burnt diesel. By way of background, the Philippines is an island country in the southwest Pacific Ocean. It is covered with thick jungles and green plains, rugged mountains rising above them. More than 7,000 tropical islands are included here. About 90% of the beautifully brown-skinned Filipinos are of Christian origin. The country is one of the primary producers of coconuts and sugar in the world. Great mahogany forests are also found here, and the waters around the islands are a large source of fish. According to archival information, the Spanish controlled the Philippines from the 1500s and ruled over them as a colony until 1898. It is therefore no wonder that many Filipinos look more Spanish than Malay or Asian. Then the United States took over under the terms of a treaty which ended the Spanish-American War. During 1942, Japan occupied the country. However, soon after, the United States regained control of the Philippines in 1945, but it became an independent republic in July 1946. The Philippines lies north of the equator and stretches 1,854 kilometers from north to south. The islands face the Luzon Strait in the north, Philippine Sea in the east, and Celebes Sea in the south. The Sulu Sea lies southwest of the islands, and the South China Sea lies to the west. The country contains three main island groups. Luzon in the north consists of Luzon, Mindoro, and a few other close islands. Visayan includes Bohol, Cebu, Leyte, Mastabi, Negros, Palawan, Panay, Samar, and a few other small islands in central Philippines. Mindanao consists of Mindanao and the other islands of the Sulu archipelago. Tony was more than willing to talk to me about Filipino race, and I had a few questions. It was important to discover a few facts. Most Filipinos belong to the Filipino-Malaysian race, and their ancestors are claimed to have come from Southeast Asia via the East Indies from circa 200 BC. Pure-blooded Filipinos have light brown skin, straight black hair, flat noses, and short, slender bodies. Christian Filipinos can be found throughout the country. Muslims live mainly in Mindanao and the islands of the Sulu archipelago, and the Spanish call them Moros or Moors. There are also pagan Filipinos who make up several tribes in the mountains of Luzon. Malay natives are known as Igorot, and their language is a form of Indonesian and is also known as Igorot. During Spanish control, many mixed marriages were said to have been the cause of a more Hispanic-looking race. However, the Chinese make up the second largest racial group. There are also small groups of mestizos, a mixed blend of whites of American or European ancestry. Interestingly, many of the country's important leaders and achievers have been mestizos. Descendants of the first people are known as negritos and are known to have migrated to the islands before 5000 BC